Hi, I'm Cindy and welcome back to our channel. Today we're talking about how we realized it was absolutely necessary to have a fully funded 6-month emergency savings ahead of a job loss or any other potential emergencies. We'll be going over the mistakes we made and how we went about correcting them, and we'll also be going over how we calculated that we will need at least $45,500 over the next 6 months to help us stay afloat after layoffs. So if you're interested in learning more about that, stay tuned. Before we jump into how we calculated that we will need $45,500 for our 6-month emergency savings and discuss how we will save for that in time, I wanted to talk about some of the mistakes that we've made. Number one was we didn't have a proper emergency fund. We only had enough saved for small, unexpected emergencies. Number two is we didn't expect that layoffs would affect us. Life was good, the job was good, and the pay was good, so we thought we were fine. For my husband, it seemed like there was plenty of job security. He had positive feedback from his managers, and the company really wasn't giving any hints to potential layoffs in the future. Number three is not staying out of debt. We've taken care of our consumer debt before, but we got back into it again, and being in debt really prevented us from putting more money into our emergency savings. Now let's jump into how we calculated how much we'll need for our 6-month emergency savings. The first thing we did was assessing our monthly expenses. These are things like mortgage, HOA, utilities, groceries, car insurance, health insurance, and things like that. We went ahead and gathered all of our billing statements, including credit card statements and things like that from the past 6 to 12 months so that we could account for the monthly subscriptions as well as the annual charges that we get billed for annually. Then we went ahead and categorized these items into essential and non-essential things. Essential items were things such as your mortgage, your insurance, groceries, utilities, etc. I'll post a snapshot here showing how we categorized our expenses into non-essential versus essential. Some non-essential things that we accounted for were things such as shopping, gym memberships, dining out, entertainment, traveling, vacations, and any subscriptions that could easily be taken off when we're in our worst case scenario. There's a lot of monthly bills and subscriptions that the prices stay the same, but there are subscriptions and billing that vary month to month, such as our electricity and gas, which is affected seasonally. We calculated the average monthly expenses for these by totaling up what it would cost for the whole year for all 12 months and divided it by 12 to get an average monthly expense. We figured by doing this would eventually even it out since we would have money set aside for this. Anything that's billed annually, we just took that amount and divided it by 12 to get our monthly expense there. By listing everything out, this is where my husband and I were able to go over what we could cut out and what we could keep. The next step is determining how much money you need saved for your 6-month emergency savings. So how did we get to $45,500? Everything that I discussed prior when it came to figuring out your monthly expenses, especially what was essential and non-essential, and figuring out what that is on a monthly basis, we added everything up and multiplied that by 6 to give us our grand total of what our 6-month emergency savings was. And this was for our worst case scenario, meaning we were both fired or we quit on our own terms and we're not going to be getting any unemployment money. And for those of you that don't know, we have a rental property in California. So that is our second mortgage that we have to consider. And that worst case scenario is that we don't have a tenant to pay the monthly mortgage. So we're accounting for those two big major circumstances. So that's how we came up with $45,500. When it came to talking to my husband about the different scenarios that we would be in, we had our worst case scenario, and we actually came up with two other scenarios. There's obviously a best case scenario, meaning that we get unemployment money for my husband and we have our tenant that continues to pay the rent at our California rental property. I'll post a picture here to show you guys what the three different scenarios look like. So with that best case scenario, with those extra funds coming in from the rental property and the unemployment money, assuming that my husband gets the maximum amount per week. So with those additional funds, we're looking at a total 6-month emergency savings of about $23,000. For us, the best case scenario is most likely going to be our case. We have a long-term tenant there, crossing our fingers, but they've expressed that they're going to be long-term and they've been renting from us for a while now, and they have no plans on moving out in the near future. And my husband did get laid off, so we foresee that there's really not going to be any hiccups with him getting the unemployment money. The second scenario that we came up with is that we still have our tenant that pays us their monthly rent, but let's say my husband gets fired, or in this case, after the 6 months of unemployment runs out, he doesn't get any unemployment money anymore, then it looks like we don't have that additional fund coming in. So that is our second case scenario. And with that being said, we would be looking at a 6-month emergency savings of approximately $30,000. Our next step in our emergency savings was figuring out how much we wanted to set aside to save per month. Originally, I was setting a goal of $4,000, but with us picking up extra work with me and my part-time job, and with my husband picking up on-call shifts, we've been able to make a bit of extra income. So realistically, we're setting about $5,000 to $6,000 aside in savings, and we've budgeted for ourselves to spend about $1,000 to $1,500 a month for expenses and for our sinking funds for the holidays that come around. As of today, our current emergency savings fund stands at $16,000. I know that it's a pretty big leap from where we were before in my previous video, and that's thanks to my husband getting his bonus from his company recently. So even though he got laid off, we were worried that his bonus was at risk, but thankfully they still honored that and gave it to him before he finishes at the end of October. So if we stay on track with our savings goals and what we've budgeted for spending for the next couple of months, we're looking at $6,000 in savings this month in September. So that would be $6,000 added to our emergency savings, which would bring us up to $22,000. So next month in October will be my husband's last month of work, so he'll still be getting his paychecks as usual, and we'll be able to set aside $6,000 then, so that $22,000 turns into $28,000 in October. And because he gets 2 weeks severance pay after his layoff, that means we'll be able to set aside that $6,000 in November towards our emergency savings, which brings us to a grand total of $32,000 for our emergency savings by mid-November. This is all if we keep on track with our budget and not overspend. So with that being said, we're still shy of our fully funded emergency savings for our worst case scenario, which is $45,500. And by mid-November, we're going to start having to tap into that emergency savings funds already to start supplementing our living expenses. So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game because we're going to be continuing to live on a budget and set aside as much savings as possible to continue contributing to our emergency savings, but we'll also be using a significant amount to cover our monthly expenses, especially our essential expenses like our mortgage and our utilities. So the good thing is that we have enough saved for our best case scenario, but unfortunately not enough for our worst case scenario. That doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to work towards savings for the worst case scenario, but we feel a little bit better knowing that we have some savings in place to get us by for the next 6 months. When we were originally preparing for this video, we felt like our numbers were constantly changing for what would be our necessary 6-month emergency savings total. And that number changed because we often forgot to account for things that would change or happen after layoffs, such as needing to get health insurance and also accounting for now that we have an auto loan and things like that. So that significantly changed the amount of expenses per month. I know many of you have already mentioned in the comments to just get rid of the car loan, and that's something that we've been considering. And that really is the worst case scenario. For those of you that have been wondering about why the major car loan, it's really due to us getting an electric car. And we've really only seen nothing but benefits with having an electric car. We've been saving so much on gas, and with all the work that we've done to be energy efficient in our home, surprisingly, our electricity bill is even less than what we used to pay, even with us charging our car at home. But of course, if things get worse, that's something for us to consider, is selling that car, getting rid of that loan, or even selling one of our older cars that we have now. So we'll revisit that in the future, but for now, we're going to see how we do and how we get by. It doesn't seem like the best choice for us to try to get rid of the car loan right now, considering how much we've invested into getting the car in the first place, and that's money lost and not money that will be gained back. Ideally, we would like to automate our savings, and that's something that we're currently working on. So if you're much better than us, that's something that we would recommend, is to automate your savings for your emergency savings fund so that you have that fully funded ahead of time. And for us, we've been transferring our savings into a high yield savings account so that we could accrue interest on that, and that's been working out well for us. The high yield savings account that we're currently using is Capital One Savings, and the current APY rate on that is 4.3%, so we're pretty happy with that. But if any of you know of any better rates, please let us know in the comments. As for any last minute tips that I have for you guys, it's to definitely keep working on getting additional income, whether that's getting a raise or looking for additional gigs or freelancing to help add to that emergency savings. That would greatly help speed things up to make sure that you have that savings fully funded in time before you actually need. Next tip is making sure that you stay true to your debt-free journey. So if you're working on getting out of debt, still make that a priority and make sure to get out of that as soon as possible. And if you're out of debt, then keep making it a priority to stay debt-free. I know that that's something that is always a challenge for my husband and I, and we hope to be better with that going forward, because we know that we've wasted a lot of money paying credit card interest and things like that, and we definitely don't want to be allocating money to that anymore. And our last tip is to don't forget to reassess major life changes, such as moving or your family's growing. So you want to make sure to account for things like that. For us, it was layoffs, so we had to reassess for that. We definitely had to think about new scenarios such as health insurance, since that was typically covered from our jobs, but now that's something that we have to figure out with both of us being unemployed. If any of you have tips with health insurance there, or any other tips for being a no-income household, we would love and appreciate any comments or ideas that you guys have to help us transition into this next phase in our life going forward. Another question that I have for my viewers is we have been pondering on what to do with our 401k. Obviously, we're not going to be having our companies pay for the 401k account anymore, and we want to figure out where to roll over our 401k going forward so that it's the best case scenario for us and it's the least costly out of pocket for us as well. So if you have any tips or resources, please feel free to share them in the comments. And that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching and following along on our journey. We hope to catch you guys in the next videos.